there are few topics out there that are as contentious as the topic of debt. When is the appropriate time to take out debt? How much debt is too much? And how can you approach debt in a smart way? And does that even exist? The truth is, there is not one single consensus whenever it comes to debt. And if you ask 10 people what their thoughts are on debt, you're going to get 10 different answers.
We don't borrow money for investments. We don't borrow money for investments. I don't teach people to borrow money. The borrower is slave to the lender.
And because of the fact that Turo is unfortunately more often than not a business model and a side hustle that gets started with some form of debt, the topic of debt is a question that I get asked a lot about. So let's get into it. In this video, I'm going to break down how I view debt, how much debt I have, and some different avenues and ways that you can look at debt if you are someone who's wanting to use it in order to get started with Turo and car sharing. But keep in mind that this is just the way that I approach debt and how I've approached it with my businesses and my personal life. I am by no means saying this is the unequivocal best way to go about doing it. This is just the way that's worked for me. Now, for those of you who are regular viewers of my channel, you probably know that I am in general very anti-debt. I don't like debt, and for most of my purchases, I avoid getting into it. But with that in mind, as I'm recording this video, I am in $598,000 worth of debt. You see, I currently have 2 car notes. My husband's GT500, which is financed at a 4.5% interest rate, and we currently owe $49,000 on it. This car is not listed on Turo. We also have our Lincoln Navigator, which is listed on Turo. We owe $19,000 on this car at a rate of 6.5%. And our goal is to have this car paid off by the end of the year. The rest of the debt comes from our primary residence as well as our rental property. We have $0 in student loan debt, credit card debt, or any other miscellaneous debt out there. And so all things considered, while we do technically have a lot of debt, the bulk of that debt is in what would be considered to be good debt, not bad debt. And even whenever it comes to our bad debt, meaning our car loans, our debt to income ratio is still very good. But whenever it comes to what I end up taking out in the form of debt and when, I do have some hard, fast rules. First is credit cards. Now, I am a big credit card person. Between my husband, HP, and I, we have about 15 to 20 credit cards. We open new ones when we have big purchases that we're going to make, and we do that in order to get good credit card points. And as a result, we get a ton of perks with airlines, hotels, and we also get some cool credit card benefits as well. We do keep track of these credit card benefits in a spreadsheet. That way we know exactly what credit card to utilize and when. For example, one of our credit cards offers free phone repairs or replacements twice per year for up to $800. That's a pretty nice perk because we know that if our phone breaks, we do have a backup plan that we can lean on besides something like AppleCare. Another one of our cards has a $150 Adobe subscription, which is excellent because I heavily use Adobe for things like Adobe Photoshop and Premiere Pro, which is the software that I use to edit my videos. And of course, we also have status with airlines, hotels, and rental car companies, which are all a big benefit. But the thing about our credit cards is that we never, ever hold a balance. I pay off the credit cards almost every single day, definitely multiple times per week. And truthfully, this is the only reason why our excessive credit cards works for us, is because we never carry a balance. I don't even like 0% interest credit cards. I don't like the idea of using a credit card as an emergency fund, and I really don't like using one as a way to carry yourself over during a tough period of time. Credit card debt is extremely toxic, and it is a very, very difficult hole to get out of once you've dug yourself into it. People do occasionally ask me, hey, what are your thoughts on buying a Turo car with a credit card if I have a 0% interest rate period? And the idea behind this question is saying, hey, if I can get a car for 0% interest and I can just pay off that car as quickly as possible with using that credit card in order to make that purchase, does that make sense? And while mathematically speaking, I can see the justification of saying yes to that type of decision, my answer to that question is always unequivocally no. Because in my opinion, using a credit card for anything that you can't pay off right then and there is just too risky of a purchase. If you were to theoretically buy a car with a 0% interest credit card that had a 12-month 0% interest period of time, and then something happened and you weren't able to list that car in Turo, maybe you had to quit Turo, maybe you had a family emergency and had to relocate. There are 100 different scenarios that could play out that could potentially prevent you from being able to pay off that car. And now you have this high interest debt once that 0% period is over. To me, there is just far much more risk here than there is reward. And so if you are without a shadow of a doubt a credit card person, and you can absolutely have credit cards without ever carrying a balance, I think that the practice of using credit cards is a really great one. But if you are not a credit card person, then you should never use a credit card. You should never use one like a credit card. You should never use one like a line of credit. Truthfully, you probably shouldn't even have a credit card if you aren't a credit card person. And so while I do heavily lean on credit credit cards in order to get some really awesome benefits that I enjoy using. If you can't use credit cards, you shouldn't have one. And if you do use your credit card, you should really be using it like a debit card and only be making purchases that you can pay off right then and there. Now, when it comes to car notes and taking out debt for the purpose of buying a car, different people have different philosophies. Some Turo hosts believe that there's a good ratio that you should adhere to. For example, 3 cash cars for every 1 financed car, or 5 cash cars for every 1 financed car. I don't really have a ratio that I particularly stick to, but I will say that I don't like to have more than 2 financed cars in my entire fleet, and that includes my personal cars. And truthfully, in an ideal scenario, I'd really like to have 0. But sometimes it does make sense to borrow money, which is why I have a maximum of 2. The first car we ever financed in our fleet was our camper van, and while we had that camper van, we also financed a Maserati. Both were business vehicles. The Maserati was totaled in 2022, so the loan was settled shortly after, and then in May of that same year, we took out a loan to buy HP's GT500. We ended up paying off the van that same summer, in the summer of 2022, which left us with 1 financed vehicle. And about a year and a half later, we bought the Lincoln with a loan in the fall of 2023. Because we do have 2 financed cars currently, when we bought my Tesla in April, we actually paid cash for it and we didn't finance it for this reason. And truthfully, we probably won't finance another car for an extremely long time because we are making the pivot into real estate, though our goal with the Lincoln is to pay off this car by the end of the year. Now, even though I do have 2 car loans, in general, I do not like car debt, and there's a few reasons why. The first reason is that if you take out debt in order to grow your Turo fleet, your margin on your Turo cars becomes significantly smaller, and so does your flexibility with your fleet. For example, just recently, I sold one of my Turo cars. My husband and I decided we wanted to sell it because it was running into some persistent issues, so we took photos, listed it, and sold it in a matter of just 2 days. If we had a loan on that car, the process of selling the vehicle would have been much longer and much harder. On a similar note is just the flexibility that this offers us with our Turo fleet. Because we only have 2 financed vehicles, one of those is our Turo car, one of those is a personal car. If we have a slow month with our Turo fleet, we're perfectly fine. And because of our extremely low overhead, we can withstand pretty much any storm for really any extended period of time as well. Because the only real fixed expenses that we have are our car notes and our insurance costs. Everything else is pretty adjustable depending on what's going on for that month. And because of this, if we want to funnel funds into other avenues, we can do that extremely easily because our operation is very fluid. The second reason why I hate car debt is from a bank's perspective. Banks really, really hate car debt. I've talked a lot on this channel about my aspirations outside of Turo, and in many regards, I use Turo to fund my other projects that I have in the works. One of those is real estate. I started investing in real estate last year, and I want to continue investing in real estate, and I'm searching for my 3rd property as we speak. But Turo and real estate really don't mix, and there's 2 reasons why. Number 1 is depreciation. Turo and car sharing is an extremely depreciation-heavy business model. Now, if you play this game correctly, like I talk about on my channel, this depreciation actually won't have an impact on you financially, but you can still use depreciation as a tax strategy to lower your taxable income, which is great whenever it comes to tax season, but it's not as great whenever it comes to borrowing money from a bank for large purchases. Which goes into my second point, which is that mortgage lenders hate car debt. If you have car debt for the sake of Turo and you want to buy something like a house and you want to borrow money for that purchase, unless your business has been established for a long time and that car purchase is completely under the business name, you're going to have a very hard time making that home purchase. Last year, my husband HP and I were trying to get approved for an out-of-state home investment property purchase, and the process of getting approved for that purchase was extremely difficult. And while we did ultimately end up getting approved and we didn't actually end up buying the property, I was shocked at how difficult it was and how many hoops we had to jump through in order to get that approval. Because on paper, we have very little debt, we have a high net worth, and we're high income earners. But the combination of having the car loan on the GT500, which at the time was at about 60 grand, paired with the fact that we are self-employed and the heavy depreciation associated with our Turo fleet, the bank definitely viewed us as more riskier than we thought that we would be. Fortunately, today we have set ourselves up to be more attractive to banks who we want to borrow money from, so the second time around we should have a much easier time. But this is something that I found to be extremely surprising given the fact that on paper we had all of the boxes checked, but we were still deemed too risky by nature of what our business was, which is Turo, car sharing, and buying cars. But if you are a Turo host who has a lot of Turo cars with loans, it is going to be very, very difficult to get approved for a loan for something like a home. And if you are someone who eventually wants to buy a house, either for yourself or as an investment property, you're going to have a hard time doing that. So take out car loans with these future plans in mind because you don't want want to be held back at the point where you do want to buy a house and you're not able to because of this car debt that you do have. Now, this is all to say that debt is highly individualized, and this is just my specific approach. I don't like debt. I had an extremely bad experience with debt in my early 20s, and now I avoid it. I also know that for the most part, having car debt is just counterproductive to my long-term career and personal goals. And again, this isn't to say that you should never take out debt or take out car debt, but what you should do is do this from an educated standpoint and keep the full picture of it in mind. Know how this debt is going to affect you both short-term and long-term, and be prepared for those repercussions. Because what I hate seeing, and what I see far too often, is Turo hosts who are stuck making less money than they could be making because their monthly car payments are far too high, Turo hosts who can't buy a house because their debt-to-income ratio is too high, or Turo hosts who go under because their overhead is too high. All of these scenarios are too common and, in my opinion, completely avoidable. Now, if you guys want to learn more about how to buy cars at the right price and how to get a below market value deal in the cars that you buy, I do have my course, the Car Sharing Masterclass, and you can use the code OFFER100 to get $100 off. Not only do you get access to 7 hours of course content when you sign up, but you also get access to our private Discord and our private monthly Zoom calls as well. You can check that out down in the description below. But like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.